I got to pick sort of the topic as the opener of this. You know, if you think about the future of ethics, what would you pick? And I thought, there's nothing better than leadership because it applies to everything we're talking about today, no matter what field it is. And so I called this Be a Leader You Would Follow, and the people that gave me that name were my undergraduates. And so at this ethics boot camp, I have, 30 leaders, and I would say to them, let's come up with a mantra for this. What's our little tag, And one student goes, let's be leaders we would follow. And I thought, that's perfect, right? So that's what we're going to call this. And the question I'm going to ask you all day is, if you were leading yourself, would you listen? Right? What kind of leader are you? Would you even follow yourself? We're going to talk about that today. But I have to start with this. Has anyone been to Jamaica? So we just got back from Jamaica. And in Jamaica, you can do things like ride dolphins. Like, who would have thought? For $500, you can ride dolphins. But my daughter, this is my 9-year-old Sophia, and she's made of fire. This kid is just brave as can be. And so she gets on these 2 dolphins, and they ride you along, and then you stand up, and she's sitting here posing, and then they throw you off, okay? So my wife goes, I planned an excursion. We're going to go ride dolphins. And then I said, that's cool. So we went and did that. She goes, then we're going to climb to a waterfall. And I'm like, cool, like I'm from Colorado. I know what that means. I got little kids. I'm sure you picked something like this. There's a nice little path, and maybe there's a few stones that you climb up, and at the top there's a waterfall, and you look at it. Anyone been to Dunn's River Falls in Jamaica? It's not like that, right? It's this, and you climb the actual waterfall. So we didn't know that till we got onto the beach, and it was too late to kind of stop. And so here we are, right? There's my 6-year-old Sydney, and you can just see how she feels about it. Because you're standing there and you're going, I don't want to do this. You go straight up. You go straight up. And because it's so dangerous, right, there's parts where you have to like slide down and hold your nose. And then other parts you have to hold each other's hand. I didn't even know that lady behind me. But the guide is like, if you don't hold hands, we're all going to fall. And so there's Sydney. She's not loving it, right? So halfway through, there was an exit point and they sort of left, right? They were off. And then it's just me and Sophie. And she's like, Daddy, we're finishing this. We're doing this, right? The thing is, though, when water is crashing down on you, you can't even see where you're stepping next. But the problem is, you can't really stop because all the people behind you are still going, right? The whole thing requires you to have some faith and trust in other people and go. So we make it to the top. This is not a story where I'm going to then tell you, and leadership is all about achieving your goals, because I would never do that again. That has nothing to do with what I want to tell you. I don't ever want to do that again. It wasn't even all that fun. I mean, I'm glad we did it, but holy crap, no thank you. This is what it is. So ethics is really easy today, but that day just reinforced to me again that in the waterfall is when it's hard, when you can't see and you can't stop and things are happening really fast and you can't really turn around, right? And that's where the skills you're going to learn today hopefully will carry you through. It's easy today. I tell my students that last night. It's easy at the ethics boot camp, right? But you get into your first company, your boss is asking you to do something unethical, right? And you want to get a promotion. You want to get your raise or whatever. You want to change jobs. You want to sell your company. And the pressure's on. You have people to impress. Maybe it's just a white lie, right? And we go from there. And so I just think that this is really, really important. Today is easy. It gets harder, and it taught me that. So now let's talk about leadership in terms of that. Picture your psychological twin. I want everyone in this room to picture someone who's psychologically just like you, okay? So they don't have to look like you at all, but they have to act like you, react like you, make decisions like you, respond like they're you, just a different person, okay? Now I want you to think of that person as your boss. And some of you in this room are going, well, that would suck, Corey. That's my point. That's you. Right? Would you follow yourself? And that's what we're going to get at today. So I did this for me. I would never ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Okay, on my good days as a boss, I'm this. I'm enthusiastic. I care about the culture. I have a vision. If someone was picking on you, I would defend you. I think that's really important. I care a lot about morale. And so if you just knew that about me, you'd be like, I would love to work for that guy. Well, those are my good days, right? On my bad days, it's different. And my wife will tell you this. She's just sit here nodding. I'm impatient, do you think? Right? And because of that, I make rash decisions. And I'm bullheaded. And I expect too much of people, even though I know I shouldn't. On my bad days, I'm a terrible leader. So here's what I found out. Would I follow myself? Yeah, on my good days, I'm awesome. And so are you. On your good days, you're an amazing leader, right? Here's the problem with that sort of thinking. There are people rely on you all the time. And I really want you to write that down. Please don't ever forget that. Your people rely on you every day. You ever had a job where you walked in and you said something like, man, I hope my boss is in a good mood today because I have to ask her for something? Your people should never have to say that about you. I hope my boss isn't having a bad day at home, so he's going to be mean to me today. People do this all the time. All over the country, people tell me they're scared to talk to their boss. They hope their boss has a good day. That's not fair. You're in charge of them, right? And then if you're going to be a leader, don't you want to at least be good at it? If you're going to set your hand to something, you should try to be good at it. What does it mean? And the last one I think is maybe the most important. The world needs more good leaders. And by good, I don't mean average, like a C average in school. I mean good in the moral sense. And what I would call it is character infused. We need more character infused leaders. And you'd think, well, that's easy. It's not. And leadership training programs, we're going to talk about this. They don't talk about that. So here are some myths, and this is what stops people from trying to do this. Myth number one is I need to be Superwoman. I need to be Superman. Like, I got to figure, if I'm not this, I'm not doing it right. Here's the thing. When the best CEOs that I meet, I make intentional effort to talk to them after the speech is over. And they say things to me like, Corey, I don't look like that at all. My pants are battered from falling down so much. I'm tired. Sometimes I don't even want to get up. I'm scared. I don't know what I want to do next, but I get up and I do it anyway. Those are the best leaders that I meet. They're not infallible. They know that they fail as leaders all the time, and they get back up and they try again, right? So that's a myth. You don't have to believe that. This is something we do terribly at universities. We think if we just teach students enough big words, they'll be good leaders. That is nonsense, right? That is nonsense, and it's important maybe after the fact, but this alone is not enough. And then the last thing is, once I figure it out, I can jump into the big pond and just do it. My advice is if you're doing it right, it's just going to get harder because you're going to dig deeper and deeper into the organization, into the culture and morale problems, right? So that's not true. It's more like that. I saw this picture and I had to pick it, at least to me. I mean, it's scary, right? And I'm more of an introverted person. You might not think that about me, but like a perfect Friday night for me would be sitting at home reading a book. Anybody else? It would be my perfect Friday night. But I still do this for a living. So introverts, you don't have an excuse, right? You still got to do it, but I don't love it. I'm not a natural born leader. I don't desire it necessarily, but sometimes it's thrust upon you. So let me tell you a story. So this is the department I work at. And I would say about maybe 10, 11 years ago, I was the department chair. And the department chair before me, we were really struggling to try to fix the culture of our department. It was a mess. And the departmental assistant would come in tears. And my very first faculty meeting here, 18 years ago, 2 professors stood up and squared off. You imagine 2 old guys like fighting? And I called my wife, do you remember this? I'm like, these guys are going to fight at this faculty meeting. What the hell is going on? I'm going to quit. And I mean, seriously, like 70-year-old, 80-year-old guys. And so it was just terrible. And so we're trying to fix this department. Well, I get a call one day, and the dean goes, Corey, the prior chair is going to go do a visiting professorship somewhere. You're the new chair. We'll talk about it later. Click. This wasn't Vivek, so. He just hung up on me. And this was 9 years ago. I remember it because I had a brand new baby. And the last thing I ever wanted to do was be the chair of this miserable department. But he wasn't asking. You ever had a situation like that? They're not asking. You don't have a choice, right? So I now have to be a leader of this department. And it reminded me of a relay race in the Olympics. And if you watched the Summer Olympics a couple of years ago, the relay races are fun because it's 4 people and you run as fast as you can and the next person follows behind you. And if you do this right, they seamlessly take the baton from you and they run. And the smoother that transition, like the more frictionless that is, the faster you go. And so they practice the handoff, right? And so that's the cool part. You know what else I think is fun? When they drop one. And it happens. It's not fun for them, but I think it's funny because what happens then is look at the guy behind them, or her, in this case, her. This next picture maybe shows it better. You have to stop, and you have to pick it up, and look at the person in front of him. You're running, right? And a lot of times in my life, I've felt like I have inherited a position, and I just had to pick up the baton, right? And the thing is, they'll pick it up. If you watch this happen, they pick it up, and they finish the race. You never win. They finish just because of pride or whatever, right? But you can't win. And I want you in your notes right now to write down, have you inherited something like that? Are you about to give someone something like that? And if stop it, right? We're going to talk about ways to prevent this because it just kills the organization. So here I am, and I'm already an introvert, and I don't want to do this, and I'm walking into this situation. Okay, so I said I'm going to go to leadership training, and I think they sent me to a leadership training, here at DU. And it's funny because I went on to Google and I looked up all the leadership trainings. These are the ones I could find, in blue. They're ubiquitous, and they're expensive, and they're $2,000 to $10,000 all over the country. They have these things. And so I went to one, and, I left. They gave us what they literally called awesome leadership tips. You could take a picture of this if you want, but it was ridiculous. So I just left thinking, how is this supposed to help me? And what happens is when you leave these trainings, you have this piece of paper. We've all been there, and you just put it away, and you never look at it again, right? I wasn't studying this. So then they said to me, don't worry, we'll send you to Leadership 2. See, that's just 101, Corey. Now you got to go to 201. It's actually a brilliant business model if you want to rip people off, right? So 201 was, they taught me big words, okay? They taught all the big words in 201. Now, my dean before Vivek was really good at big words. So he would write emails, and I couldn't understand them. I'd have to read them like 3 times. You ever met someone like that? They just write really complicated emails. And I went to law school. And I'm trained to interpret English, and I couldn't. So I kept taking his emails, like, what is a scaling predictive modeling? I have no idea what that even means, right? So I kept taking his emails as like a little game, and I put them into a Google grammar calculator. I never showed him this, but he would get a C every time. Look what it says. Hey man, you're using too many long words. What's the solution? Use shorter words. Be more concise and clear. But he had a leadership degree, right? He had leadership training, so he was using big words. You don't have to write like that. So that didn't help me. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to Amazon, and I'm going to buy a book. And there are hundreds of thousands of leadership books. So I could lead like a black belt. I could lead like a lion. I could lead like Jesus, or I could lead like a heretic. And I'm assuming those 2 books are different. I mean, I didn't buy any of them. What do you think my favorite 2, and I didn't buy these, my favorite 2 though, here we go. Leading like a pirate and leading like water. If I could just lead like my Aquafina bottle, life would be great. Are you freaking kidding me? So I didn't buy any of those. And by the way, this is not to, throw cold water on leaders. There are plenty of good leadership books, right? I just think these weren't in the mix of that. So here's my thesis for today, and I want to see if you agree with me. Do you agree as a society we strive to turn people into leaders? Do you agree with that? Okay, then how come so rarely do we have good bosses? When I go around the country, one of the questions I ask is, how's your boss? And if the boss isn't there, man, I hear it all. And I would say 2 out of 10 go, my boss is amazing. My boss cares about me. My boss cares about my family. And sometimes it's my boss is okay. A lot of times it is, I can't wait to quit, Corey. I can't wait. And I guarantee you those bosses have either done the leadership training or put it onto their employees. A lot of times someone who hires me is the CEO, but then they don't come to the thing, right? So this is a problem. And I'll tell you why it happens. We have skipped a step, and I said this to the undergraduates last night. The step we skip when it comes to ethics is we just skip this. And we do the leadership training, and the principles don't come up, and no ethics comes up at all. And I think we just assume, and I don't know, I've been doing this for 18 years. My assumption is we believe people just already know that. And I think that's a huge mistake. So when I went to law school, we had an ethics class, right? And they taught us a bunch of stupid rules. Don't have sex with your clients. Check. Honey, I'm good. Okay? Don't steal your client's money. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's, to me, dumb because lawyers still cheat. A lot. In medical school, you have ethics rules. Doctors still cheat. Engineers still cheat. Accountants still cheat. I can't tell you how many accounting conferences I've been to because they need the continuing ethics education, right? So these classes by themselves, it's not enough. And I think what we have to do is talk to people about, hey, listen to me. Deep in your soul, do you care about being a good person? Deep in your soul, do you care about these principles? Because if someone doesn't, we are wasting their time. Your little core values are going to be meaningless to someone who doesn't care about their integrity. You're going to have them on a piece of paper and they're going to be irrelevant. Your mission statement is going to be absolutely meaningless to someone who doesn't care about fairness, right? And so we think, well, we have this on a piece of paper and I make them carry it around in their wallet. Here's the thing. So did Enron. Enron had a mission statement. Theranos had a core values. I mean, all these companies who've ever cheated, I went and looked them all up. There's like 50 of them. They have beautiful core values. Enron said we'll be the most ethical company around. That's what it said. Volkswagen, before its scandal with the emissions, said we will be the most transparent car company in the world. Oops. But they had it all in their core values. So it doesn't impress me if you show me your core values. I'm going to ask you a deeper question, right? Do you really believe in them? Or are they there just to appease your sort of stakeholders? Okay, so we can't skip that piece. But then, and I want you to write this down, all the other stuff does matter. Stephen Covey, John Maxwell, there are awesome leadership people out there. There's a lot of good stuff. My argument to you is that it is irrelevant until you believe that ethics matters. Otherwise, we're just checking a box in a transactional world. And what I really should say is an ever more transactional world. We're just checking boxes. And so today, for me at least, I'm going to focus on the heart piece and the character piece And then you can go do the other stuff later. So again, let me prove this to you that I think I'm right, okay? If you don't care about your character, these are my awesome leadership tips, remember that I got? Are you going to be emotionally aware? No, of course you're not. Are you going to be humble and transparent if virtues don't mean anything to you? No, of course not. Are you going to find a mentor? Are you going to celebrate other people's successes? No, because transactional people do not celebrate other people's successes. It's just a means to an end to something else. None of this will work, so you can give them this list, but you're starting at a position and a foundation where they don't care. Now, once character matters, do I disagree with any of this? I mean, I guess you can only give 100%. Wherever my athletes are in here, coach like, give 200%. You can't, dude. 100's your max, right? So let's go for if I tell my students, if you give me 10% of your attention, you'll get an A, right? So we got to stop talking like that. But these aren't terrible, but I wouldn't hand them out. Okay, so these are some leadership training programs. I just went this morning. I didn't have a lot of time, but I looked up the first 2 prestigious leadership training programs I could find. This one costs $9,000. This is what they will teach you over the course of whatever the 10 weeks is. Do you see the word ethics, character, principles, values anywhere in there? It's not, right? So it's to leverage leadership and boost your resilience so you can get promoted, right? I mean, inspiration maybe is the closest that it comes. I don't disagree with any of this. I think it's really important. But again, you're missing the piece. Okay, so then I went to the second one. This one is $2,500. Look at all you get to do. What do leaders talk about? Discover your leadership style. I can't tell you how many leadership tests there are out there. How do you build your influence and power so you can get promoted? Again, ethics, nowhere mentioned. Values, character, principles, nowhere. And these were just the first 2 in a row that I picked. So, take statistics and, it's going to probably be the same. But that's what we're paying for, right? And again, in itself, it's not bad. It's just missing something. So this is what we're going to be today, okay? What does a good leader mean? What does it mean to be a good, in a moral sense, leader? Now, let me tell you this. I want you to take a picture when I get through all of these or write these down. This is stuff that we don't see from leaders but should. Okay, so this is what I've sort of come to after doing all these talks. Do you always self-reflect on the moral aspects of your leadership? And I'm just going to use myself as an example when I became the department chair. I never did that. I went home to my wife and I said, I got a bunch of mean people working for me. I got a bunch of dumb people working for me. I got a bunch of people who are phoning it in. They don't care. But all I did was go home and point the finger. You ever done that? And I know you have. Don't lie to me. Never once did I say, hey, Corey, how are you today? Did you inspire anybody today? Were you kind to people today? Were you fair today? Did you look out for the interests of... never once did that. And so I had to make it like a conscience change. Like I have to reflect on my leadership too. That's number one. You check in with everyone because I didn't want to. And it's interesting because I wanted to check into the people, not necessarily my friends. I wanted to check in with the people who respected me, not who are my friends necessarily. And if I didn't think you respected me, I didn't want to check in with. That is terrible leadership. But that's the human tendency, right? So then I didn't check in with everyone. Played favorites. Do you genuinely care? That's the one thing I had going for me. As you can probably tell, I genuinely care about this job. I think it's really important. So I did care about that. But I will say this to you. It is impossible to lead people you don't like if you don't genuinely care about what you're doing. And you're just going to run straight into a brick wall there. So think about that. Number 4, do you want to compromise your values? And it's tempting, isn't it? This goes back to your freshman year in college, where you don't want to go out so often, you don't want to party so much, but you know that if you don't fit in, right? And so you already start compromising your values, and it's easy to do that as a leader. Do you own your mistakes? I didn't want to. I want to say, well, I didn't do it. But the thing is, I was the chair of the department. I was the captain of the ship. Are you professional? Do you love your work? Professional in the way that you write your emails. Not wordy, professional. It's different. And then last, I would say, are you going to pass the baton well? I'm going to keep coming back to that today. And what I really want you to be thinking about now till the end is, when I leave this company, wherever I am now, the situation I'm in, how is the next person going to find it because I was there? And here's the thing. I think you have a moral responsibility to pass it well. Because genuinely, often, the person you pass it to is not the one that's causing you problems. Right? They're not the one that's your problem. You're going to drop it and just leave. And I think you have an obligation to pass it well, whether you retire, quit, get fired, find another job. I don't care why you leave. You have a moral obligation to pass it well. So that became my goal. When I pass this on to the next department chair, it's going to be better than when I found it. Okay, so I hate acronyms. I'm going to give you one today, but I hate them. And here's why. I went to a company once and they gave me this, and the guy's like, you have to talk about this in your speech. I need you to talk about this. I'm like, what does this even mean? You're a book publishing company. I don't know what to do. So I just kind of ignored it. What does that even mean? Like, duh. Have anyone been to Iceland? In Iceland, there's this thing called the Blue Lagoon. And at the Blue Lagoon, they serve these ices there, right? And they're called crap. Because it's an acronym for something. So all these Americans were walking around Iceland going, thanks for the crap, it's delicious. Do you remember that? It was really good. This is from a different country, but someone puts that on the wall. It's not really an acronym, but like shows the boss, hey, how does it look? And she's like, it looks great, here's your check. Some of you are like, I don't get it, so ask your neighbor. This is from my daughter's school. So I remember my daughter went to preschool and they sent this home. And this is horrible. So math is movement, activity, teacher, hands-on. I want teacher, hands-off. I read the news, okay? And why are there letters down there if it's math? And why isn't it centered? It's lame. So my daughter's like, what do you want me to tell my teacher? I'm like, tell her that sucks. She's like, Daddy, you're not supposed to say that word. That sucks. Okay, I'm going to give you an acronym. I don't like them, but I think this one you'll remember, okay? Good leaders are what we need. And the reason that I say this is going to fit into these little philosophies I'm going to teach you really quickly. But I think you'll remember this if you could pigeonhole it in those terms. And so in our classes, whether it's an executive MBA, where are my executive MBA students? You're here. You're awesome. You're awesome for coming. We'll talk about this. In my undergraduate sophomore level class, we'll talk about this. Wherever I go, I talk about this. So let's go through it, okay? I believe that this can fix your worst leadership traits. What I can't fix are the technical things that you do, because I don't know your job and I don't know what you do. But the non-technical leadership stuff you can fix instantly by doing this. Okay, by doing some of the things. And it's philosophy, but it doesn't have to be hard. It isn't that hard. Okay, so G is golden mean. This is Aristotle. If you've ever taken a philosophy class or you've heard of Aristotle, I think this is really, really powerful. And Aristotle's point simply would be, if you want to flourish, you need to be a virtuous person. Right? And so then people next ask me, what does that mean? And so I came up with this sort of airport test. A virtue is something that a human being inherently considers to be good. So if you went to an airport anywhere around the world and you tapped someone on the shoulder and said, excuse me, is it good to be honest? What would they say to you? Anywhere, sure. Go to a different airport, different person, you go, excuse me, is it good to be kind, compassionate? They'd be, yeah. Different airport, different person, and you say, excuse me, is it good to be wealthy? Well, I don't know. It just depends. You're going to get a different answer wherever you are. And I watched Colorado change in this sense from when I was a kid, right? When I was a kid in Colorado, they might not have said yes, and now I don't know what they would say. That doesn't mean wealth is bad. It means it's not a virtue, because we don't all agree to its benefits. Does that make sense? And so Aristotle would said you want to find those, and you want to be in the middle of those. You don't want too much of any one, and you don't want too little. He called that the golden mean. Right, the sort of center of what the virtue means. So you do that habitually, right? You make that your practice, and then you hang around people that do that. And while you're doing that, you decrease the vices in your life. So the jealousy, the envy, the greed, right? The meanness, the dishonesty, you decrease those and you increase your virtues, and then and only then you will flourish. Now, I always add this to the end. This has to be your whole life. I think it's nonsense when we tell people, okay, this is who you are at work, go home and be whoever you want. You're one person. And when you're miserable at home, you're going to be miserable at work. And when you do something bad at work, you're going to take it home, right? So how about just be one person and be the same you are at work as you are at home? Okay, so let's just quickly walk through this. So draw these on your little piece of paper. And then we would all agree that honesty is a virtue, right? So let's figure out where you are on that. So here's just a couple of quotes. Tell a lie once and all your truths become questionable. That's right, isn't it? You ever had someone lie to you and you never trust them again? Which is ironic because we lie to people all the time and hope they trust us. But man, if you lose my trust, and I know I shouldn't do this, but I don't really want anything to do with you. And that's just how humans are. But here's a better one, okay? I put anonymous. This is me, but if you don't like it, it's anonymous. If you like it, it's me. When it comes to ethics, we do math. And we do math too often. So if I were to ask you if you're an honest person, and you won't even think about this, right? You'll just go, you'll do math, and you'll say something like to yourself, I am honest 93% of the time. And I lie 7% of the time, and 93 is greater than 7, so yes. The problem with math is you could go all the way to 51 and say yes, right? And so you can't do that. You can't do math when it comes to this. So when I say golden mean, it's not a mathematical mean. Here's what it is, okay? If you lied and someone found out that you lied that loves you, would they believe it? So I do a lot of bad things in my life. One thing I don't do is lie. I don't know why, I just don't lie. If you went to my wife or my daughters or my executive MBA students and said, you know what, I went to this conference with Professor C and that man stood up there and lied to me for an hour, my students would be like, are you sure that's him? No, I don't think so. But if you said, I think that guy's kind of arrogant, they'd be like, yeah, that's just Professor C. Which is a problem for me. Here's the thing, I can call myself honest. I can't necessarily call myself humble. Does that make sense? So ask yourself right now, are you honest under that? And you could do this for everything. If you went home and told my daughters that I was a total jerk, they would be like, what? Are you sure? So that's the test. It isn't math. Okay, so when this is honesty. So what I want you to do is the middle there is honesty, the perfect definition of honesty. If you go to the left, you have a deficiency of honesty and you are a liar. Does the world have too many liars? Are you one of them? 50% of the room probably tends liar. The other side's not any better. What do you call someone who's too honest? The clean version, this is being recorded. Blunt? Yeah, my students be like, hey, oh. Do we have too many blunt leaders? Let's walk through this. You ever had a lying boss? That's terrible. You ever had a blunt boss? And people say, you can never be too honest at my company, Corey. Sure you can. Your spouse walks into the room in a brand new outfit and says, how do I look? And you go, fat. And I'll say that to someone, he'll be like, I can't say that. Well, you just told me you can't be too honest. Well, I can't say that. Of course you can't say that, right? So there's a middle ground. So where are you? Write it down. Mark off where you are. Okay, if you were to go to an airport and ask people about compassion, they would consider that to be virtue. So it's to look beyond your pain to see the pain of others. Can you do that? So 3 words we need to talk about here. What is sympathy? Sympathy is feeling bad for someone. Okay, a lot of us do that. You see someone, you're homeless, whatever, you feel bad, you move on. What is empathy? Empathy is I've been there. Right? You can't be empathetic unless you've been there. So like, this happened to me, this happened to you, I can relate. But you can't be empathetic to everyone because you haven't been there. Compassion is what? It's sympathy plus wanting to help. And we can all do that. It's I see this, I don't like this, I'm going to help. That's what we need in our leaders. Compassionate leaders. You don't have to have been in someone's shoes to care and want to help them. That's why it's a virtue. Aristotle's not wrong. And if you don't believe me, just Dalai Lama, go ahead. I'm not making this up, right? So if we looked at our compassion scale, you would look to the left, and a deficiency of compassion is what? A jerk? Does the world have too many jerk bosses? Are you one of them? Well, I was going to ask that. If I asked the people that work for you, where would they put you on the compassion scale? Now, the other side isn't good either. If you have too much compassion, you're a doormat, aren't you? And you don't want a doormat boss. We've all had someone like that. And so here's my marriage, okay? I'm more of a jerk. My wife is more of a doormat. We're perfect. That's terrible. Have y'all ever played the prisoner's dilemma game? Where 2 people are negotiating and one party competes and one party cooperates? You know what happens? The person who competes just dominates them. And I have to know that in my marriage, like that's my personality trait and that's hers. And in most people's relationships, one person is more like that. And so I have to know that about my wife. So I'll say to her all the time, honey, you need to be less compassionate. And she looks at me, she's like, who talks like that? And I'm like, Aristotle. She's like, shut up, and walks away. But what she's doing is she's thinking I'm asking her to do math. She's thinking I'm asking her when I say you're too compassionate. She thinks I'm asking her to be a jerk. I'm not. I'm asking her to be less compassionate and find the golden mean. And I need to be more. So write down where you are. And again, this is going to be your homework. Okay, courage to me is a meta virtue, meaning without courage, I don't think you can do the other ones. So talk about speaking truth to power. If you're not courageous, you can't do that. You're not going to stick up for your employees if you don't have courage. So I want you to take a picture of this or write this down. I love this so much. Courage is just fear that has said its prayers and decided to go forward anyway. So just listen to me. If you aren't scared, you can't act courageously. So next time you're scared, that's good, right? And then you got to act. And remember at the beginning I told you what those leaders told me? Corey, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Good, then you can be courageous. Good, right? If you aren't scared, then you can be bold or some other things, but you can't be courageous, okay? So again, if you don't have enough courage, you're a coward. If you have too much courage, you're foolhardy. And that's what you see in all these companies that you see in the news, these scandals. There are foolhardy leaders, but then you have cowardly leaders too. My daughter, I think, when we were walking up that waterfall was a little too foolhardy, right? But I followed her right into it, and that's the problem, right? You have a leader who's foolhardy, you go right with them. And then the last one, I put 2 on here. I just think it's interesting. Can you be humble and proud at the same time? Because Aristotle would say these are both virtues. And if you've seen this movie, it depicts it perfectly. So this guy was an airline pilot, and birds hit both of his engines, right? And the plane is going to crash, and it's going to crash right over New York City. And this was right after 9/11. There's a whole movie about this. And so this guy's a former Air Force, he's a really good pilot. And so he finds a way to glide this plane because it has some speed still. And he lands on the Hudson River, okay, just west of Manhattan. And if you look at this thing on YouTube or whatever, he lands. I've had harder landings on Delta on pavement. This guy's just 155 people on this plane. And it's sinking, right? And so he's walking through because he's the leader, he's the boss, he's the captain. He's going aisle to aisle to aisle, and everybody gets off. It was an amazing story. And so the Coast Guard was there. New York really came together for this, like it does. And so he's interviewed by Katie Couric. This was 4 months later. And I'm sitting in a hotel room in Austin, Texas. And back in those days, if you're old like I am, it was either Katie Couric or Australian Rules football on hotel TV. Remember those days? So nothing else to watch. And so I see this guy, and she goes, "Sully, you're a hero for what you did." And he's a military guy, right? So he goes, "Nope, Katie, just doing my job." And I started getting really mad. You ever been mad at the TV? Well, you've seen a Broncos game. It was like that, And I'm just like, "Hey, man, you landed an airplane on water." And usually when that happens, everybody dies. And sometimes you don't even find the airplane. They can't even find that one off Australia. So if you're not a hero, nobody is. So just say it. And he wouldn't say it. Do you want to know why? What was he trying to do? Be humble, right? But he missed this lecture, okay? So she got him. So she brings out his family. She sneaks his family out there. And she has a bunch of letters that she's procured from people involved in the accident. And one of them said, "Thank you for bringing my husband home safe. You're my hero." The next one said, "Thank you for bringing my dad home safe." But I'm just in tears. Well, the last one got him. And this guy wrote, "My brother was a firefighter in 9/11, and he rushed into the World Trade Center, and it collapsed upon him. And if I would have died in this airplane crash in this city, my entire family would have imploded. So thank you, you're my hero." And I'm just done, right? I have a problem. I'm in a hotel room crying at Katie Couric. Finally, this guy goes, "Well, Katie, you put it like that, guess I am a hero." And I'm like, "Amen, brother. You just wasted an hour of my time." If you knew Aristotle, you could just say it. Because when you land an airplane on water, you're a hero. And if I was talking to that guy at a cocktail party and I had never met him before in my life and he told me he landed an airplane on water, I wouldn't be like, "What a cocky prick." He was trying to be humble and not proud. And here's what happened, okay? So let's go to my little chart for a second. Instead of being proud, he defaulted, because he didn't want to be the excessive pride, which is arrogance. So he defaulted to the deficiency of pride, which is meekness. But you don't have to do that. So my question for you is, what are your airplane on water moments in your life? What are your airplane on water moments in your company? And I want you to brag about that. But then what is humility, Corey? Humility is letting other people figure out how cool you are for themselves most of the time. So you get to brag a little about that really important stuff, and then for everything else, you let other people figure it out. And when you do that, you can be both. And if you spend any time with me, the only thing I really talk about is my family. Like my EMBAs, they don't know a lot about me. They just know I love my family. And for everything else, they can Google me. Lisa, our associate dean, goes, "Corey, we have no idea what you're doing in the dean's office. I'm not good at that. I just talk about my family." Okay? I didn't tell her to Google me, but that's what I want you to do, right? Be humble, be proud. You can do both. Okay, the last part of this is don't compromise your values. Because when you do that, people won't ever respect you. So my students will say things to me like, "Professor C, if you just told us it was okay to have a fake ID but not drink too much, more students would like you. If you just told us it's okay to smoke a bunch of pot but don't do anything worse, more students would like you." And because they're trying to help me. They want students to like me. And I say to them "But would you respect your ethics professor that did that?" And people ask me, "Do you want to be friends with your students?" I mean, sure. I want them to respect me first. Do you want to be best friends with your kids, Corey? Yes. Why else have them? I would love to be best friends with my kids, but I want them to respect me first. You ever seen a parent where the kids don't respect them, but they're really good friends? That fails. But if my kids respect me, why not be good friends? But you can't do that when you compromise your values because people won't respect you. So in your organization, you need to structure all the arrows that way. You start at a common point and you work together, and if someone doesn't fit in, you don't just fire them. It's a conversation of, hey man, our values don't seem to be in line. And a lot of times when you do that, they'll leave. And when you hire somebody, if you're not asking questions in an interview like, define integrity for me, define character for me, you've got to ask those questions. And listen, I teach employment law. That's not illegal. You can ask them what they think of character. How else are you going to find someone who's going to go that way with you? Okay, so you want to all work together. Okay, the O, this is utilitarianism. This means you've got to look out for others, promote the common good, look at the consequences of your decisions. So you're trying to create pleasure in the organization and avoid pain. And there'll be plenty of times in your organization where you can't always create pleasure. You have to lay a bunch of people off. Well, there's a way to lay people off and minimize pain. You see that Better.com CEO who laid off all those people by Zoom. Do you remember that? Just couldn't care less about this. But there was a huge backlash. There's a way to lay people off with some dignity, right? And if you have an others outlook, then it makes sense. And so again, you're going to do this at home and at work. And I think these next 3 slides might be the most important ones, okay? Listen to all of your people. Everyone should have access to your office. I've had too many bosses in my past where only 3 people could come in there. And those 3 people, of course, would tell the boss everything the boss wanted to hear. The problem with that is those people should probably be fired, and the one who's going to pay the price at the end of the day is the boss, because it's not as awesome as they're telling you. Morale isn't as high as these people are telling you, which is why you've got to call people in and ask them, hey, and here's the question, this is easy, how is it really going? And then you say to them, tell me the truth, and there's no repercussions. You have to tell me. If you don't know, knowledge is power. If you don't know, you'll never fix it. Okay, this is any organization. This is my classroom. When I walk into my classroom on the first day of class, I have this. I have my awesome students. They're a joy. I've got my B students. They're also a joy. They just have other things going on. They're great. My C students, I still like them because I can proselytize to them about ethics and I can convince them. What I don't want is over here, the D and the F students. And for whatever reason, they're just not plugged in. I don't want that. So the first day of class, every single quarter, I walk in there and I go, this class, first thing I say, this class has an oral final. And that oral final is 50% of your grade. And you got to sit in my office for 10 minutes or we're going to talk about the Supreme Court and I'm going to give you the questions. And I sit there. Now, as soon as I say that, what do my good students do you think? They're like, this is awesome. I love this class. Because they know in that kind of environment, if they make a mistake, they can correct it and they can talk to me. What do my bad students do? What do you think my bad students? They get their backpack, they get up and they leave. And I go, bye. Don't let the door hit you. Take Bruce's class. No, I'm just kidding. They go somewhere else, right? It's exactly what I want. And do you want to know why? I've just taken my bell curve and I've moved it to the right. That's what you want to do in your organization. What can you do to move the bell curve to the right? Now, but I have to add this. What if one of those bad students does not take his backpack and leave? It's my problem. And I got to teach the class. And this theory says I got to include that kid because everyone counts. They're in my class. I got to include them. It happens from time to time. And I got to teach the class different. You're not going to have, this is not a panacea, right? But I try to move them out of there. And if I don't, I got to deal with them. Again, this is where your culture really, really matters. And then the last part of this, I think, is find the strengths of the people that work for you and use them. Do you have any idea what the strengths of the people that work for you are? I mean, I've been here for a long time at DU. They never asked me to speak at an orientation. I'd be really good at that. I probably speak at 50 orientations over the last 5 years. Don't even ask me here. I don't even think they know I'm good at it. But I feel like I'm a good basketball player that doesn't feel compelled to ask the coach to play. See, I've played basketball my whole life, and I've never seen a player ever walk up to the coach and go, put me in. I mean, they might, but it doesn't work. Why? I don't know. So find out who the people, find out what their value is, and then use it. Even if you don't like them, even if you're mad at them, even if you don't jive with them, use it. You have them on your team. Otherwise, you're just wasting their talents. The reason I do a lot of public speaking outside of DU is I didn't want to waste the talent. And they weren't asking me, right? So find out what your people's strengths are. Make that a goal when you go back to work, okay? And then utilize that. And then last, lead people you don't like. Everybody matters under this theory. Okay, the second O, own your mistakes. Write this down, even if you didn't make it. And even if it conflicts with your agenda, right? You still have to own it because you're the boss. This is rare because this is humbling for people to do this. So what I'm going to show you here are two letters, and we're going to juxtapose them. This is a statement of an executive from a publishing company. He got in trouble because they didn't meet their targets, so he had to report to the board of directors why. And just as I read some of this to you, ask yourself if you'd want to work for this person, okay? As boss, I take full ownership of failing to hit the target. I take full responsibility to lead the turnaround. I made the decision to release the novel. It didn't work. I depended too heavily on movie tie-ins. That didn't work. I overestimated. I didn't acquire enough authors. Listen, he didn't do all this. 400 people work there. But you want to work for someone like this? I would love to work for someone like this. He didn't do it, but he realized he was the boss. Now let's juxtapose it to this. Some of you have heard this story. This is the former president of Michigan State University. Did you see the news? So Larry Nassar was a doctor for gymnastics, and he had assaulted hundreds and hundreds of young girls. And it came to light at some point that he worked for Michigan State University. And the president obviously was getting heat for that, like why? And at first I felt kind of sorry for her because, geez, there must be 30,000 people that work at that institution. And how is she to know all of them? But as she started talking, my sympathy went completely away. So she had to resign. And that's what happens when you can't manage crises with character, right? Well, let's read this. Tell me if you see the differences. Last year and a half has been very difficult for the victims of Larry Nassar, for the university community, and for me personally. Do you see where this is going? The other letter was I. This is me. This is passive, right? In grammar, this is more passive language, which means the action is happening to the subject. The subject isn't doing it. To the survivors, I can never say enough that I am so sorry that a trusted, renowned physician was really such an evil blah, blah, blah. Where should that sentence have stopped? Where would you have stopped that sentence? I'm so sorry, period. I know he's an evil guy. That's pretty obvious to me. I'm trying to figure out about you. And when you apologize like this, you don't mean it. And we've all apologized like this, and we don't mean it. There was Bring Your Dad to School Day at my daughter's school, and it was during COVID, and I got to go in there, and I had to wait my turn, and so they were all on this little rug, and I walked in there, and the teacher goes, okay, Sophie's dad is here today. Sit down, Corey. We're going to talk about apologizing. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is my thing. Cool. So we sit down, and the teacher goes, kids, repeat after me, and I want you to do this, okay? She goes, I'm sorry, period. I'm sorry. She goes, all right, let's go to recess. What just happened? This is my dad day. So I went to recess and whatever. I shot baskets, but I was frustrated. But then on the way home, I'm like, wait a second. That was beautiful. My daughter's teacher didn't teach my daughter how to add commas to her apology, how to add clauses, how to not mean it. She just said, say you're sorry and go to recess. Say you're sorry and move on. She could have said that. She didn't do it. Right? I was so proud of that day. I didn't get screwed at all out of my daddy day, because I really appreciate that sort of learning, right? Well, anyway, let's keep going. This is going to get worse. As his journey to prison was drawing to a close, more and more negative attention was focused on the university and on me. And parentheses you could put, and that's not fair, right? Fairness. I don't believe that's fair. I am pleased that statements have been made by the board about my integrity and the fact that there is no cover-up by me. And then the rest of it is throwaway sentences. Okay, now promise me you'll never write this first sentence, ever. As tragedies are politicized, blame is inevitable. Yeah. 300 girls got molested. Yeah, blame's inevitable. Don't ever write that. Of course there's going to be blame, and of course people are going to be mad. As president, it's only natural that I am the focus of this anger, and that isn't fair. That's why I have limited my personal statements. That's not what the other guy did. Now, I'm a lawyer, and I get Fifth Amendment, right? But you can say more than that. Throughout my career, I have consistently and persistently spoken and worked on behalf of the team. I've tried to make it not about me. When? I urge those who have supported my work to understand I could not make it about me now. Therefore, I'm tendering my resignation according to my legal agreement. But before we throw stones at her, I need to tell you something. This would be the first letter I would write. Just so you know. Like if I was in her shoes, just being a human being, my natural inclination would be, I didn't do it, and I would write this letter. And I think a lot of us would. And then I would remember today, and I would remember what I do for a living, and I'd crinkle it up, and I'd do it again. But I don't think it's fair for me to ask you to conscientiously not write this letter. I think it's just in our nature. But I want you to throw it away, and I want you to write a different one, right? She's not owning her mistakes. And her mistake wasn't even probably hiring him. The mistake was in the crisis management piece. There's a character failure. Last is duty. This is Kant. And this might be my most favorite one, and it wasn't in the past. I was always an Aristotle person, and I really liked that. I am just tired of people being mean to each other. And I'm tired of people taking advantage of each other. I'm just tired of it. So I've become more this. So the question you constantly have to ask is, what is your duty as a leader? What is your duty in this community? Don't make exceptions for yourself that you're not willing to grant to others. I just think we need this now. Because whether it's a Colorado highway and people cutting you off, and then when they get cut off, they're furious. Whether it's a line in a supermarket, whether it's an airplane, whether it's an office, right? We become so transactional. I'm just sick of it, right? So here's what I want you to think about. If I get to do this, then everybody gets to do this. And what would a world where everybody gets to do this look like? And if you wouldn't want to live in a world like that, don't do it. So I have to ask myself all the time, hey, Corey, would you want to live in a world where people are impatient like you are? No, then stop it. Knock it off. Fix it. Do you want to live in a world, I tell my students, where students only care about their grade to get the minimum score they need to move on? No, then don't act that way. I just think this is really, really important. And so we can sort of walk through an example with this really quick. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And the thing is, you're like, that's always, never? Should I never, ever lie? Here's the thing. I think there's very few situations where I think it's ethical to lie. So I can't say 100% don't, but how about, here's one of them. Are you hiding Jews in the basement? Lie. For everything else, don't. Hey, Corey, should I steal? I don't know. Your kid is really sick. The medicine is right there. You could steal it, and you can't afford it. And without that medicine, she's going to die. Then steal it, okay? Other than that, don't. Can you ever think of a situation in your life where you lied and it worked to your long-term advantage? Or where you stole or you were mean and it worked to your so don't think of this as too strict, right? And again, if you lie once, it doesn't mean you forever are excluded from the theory. Just don't do it again. So I think I've become this. And this is maybe why. This is sort of the last part for me. If I found $20 outside, it was just laying on the ground, and I brought it in here, and I said to you, I found $20. I'm going to give it to someone today. Would you want it? Raise your hand if you would take $20. I just found it. You'd take it, right? Perfectly correct. What if I told you, though, before I picked it up, I accidentally stepped on it? Raise your hand if you'd still take it. Okay. What if I spit on it? You still in? Peed on it. Take this off the film. You're still in? Why? It's got what? What does it have? Intrinsic value. Listen to me very carefully. So do people. Stepped on, spit on, kicked down. They're still humans. And this theory makes you remember that. And in our business world, we have to remember that. These aren't just pawns in some game that meets your needs so you can advance in your career. These are human beings. And so I think I've become a Kantian. I don't know. I think in our world today, we need this. Don't ever forget that. Okay. Leadership is, the dean ruined my game. Where's this from? This is the Ciocchetti. Guess what it included? The word integrity. We cannot live in a world where the Ciocchetti is more ethical than the human beings who create leadership programs. We can't live in a world where this thing tells you what's right, yet we can't even live it in our own life. That's beautiful, right? I didn't even write it. How long did it take you to find it? 2 minutes? 30 seconds. And it just basically encapsulated my speech. This is scary and this is dangerous, right? But we have to live this stuff. So I'll leave you with this. And I love this picture because it's just kids. You're going to pass the baton in some way or the other, in some area of your life or the other, and I really want you to ponder the rest of the day today, how are you going to do it? You should do it like they do it in track, correctly, frictionless, right? That's my hope. And if you care about morality and all these things, you'll be better at doing that. So when I ended up not being chair anymore, and I stopped as soon as I could, whatever the minimum term was, I stopped. And I would never want to do that again, and I don't even think I was good at it. But the day that I left, I noticed something. The departmental assistant didn't come in tears anymore, and people were liking each other. And I didn't get a lot done in terms of fundraising and stuff, but people liked each other. And it was a fun place to work again, and now we like each other. And you know, as you pass the baton, I passed the baton to a guy named John, and you know what he got to do with it? Run. He got to run. He didn't have to pick up all the pieces and stop and fix everything. He just got to run. And so though I was disappointed in some of the stuff, I was happy that I could do that, and I would never want to be chair of that department ever again. It was the proudest professional accomplishment I've ever had at this place. And I would never want to do it again. So those of you in this room who think leadership is not for you, and me too, But if you are put into that position, if you're going to be a leader, then be a good one. And be a good one in the moral sense. Okay, I'm done. Let's enjoy our day, okay?